Congressman, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Kenya. I really appreciate your kind introduction. And more than that, I appreciate your friendship. We miss you in Washington. You did a great job, and you're doing a great job here in our community right now. So thank you. Thank you, President Harris. I love the Urban League. I love all the members of the Urban League and friends of the Urban League. Y'all are really helping our community advance. I bring you a lot of good news today. And you know, it's hard just a couple of days after Easter to talk about really good news, because that's the ultimate good news, Easter. This is pretty amazing for here on earth good news, because Congress has really never done anything this big before. It's remarkable. So I want to describe the parts of it. I want everybody in Nashville and our surrounding areas to benefit from this. And it's a little bit like an Easter egg hunt. We're going to have to go out and find some of these golden eggs. But there are a bunch of golden eggs around, and it's kind of remarkable. Now, some of them are going to land in your mailbox, but some others we're going to have to just find.
And look to understand a challenge.
This is an amazing time in American history. So let me describe some of the opportunities that we all have right now. When you call a bill 1.9 trillion, that doesn't fit on our calculators. It doesn't fit in our brains. But if you had 60,000 years of seconds, that would be about 1.9 trillion seconds, 60,000 years of seconds. Now, overall, Congress has already passed some other bills. So in aggregate, altogether, it's already been $4.4 trillion. This is astonishing. The American government has never done anything this big. This is like 3 times bigger than Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal. It's not quite as big as the Great Society, perhaps, but in a 1 or 2 year period, it is bigger than the Great Society. So this is remarkable. And as I say, I want everybody back home here in Nashville to benefit. And by the way, if you need to contact me directly, I've already given everybody my cell phone number. You're welcome to have it too. It's 615-714-1719. That's 615-714-1719.
I want people to know how important it is. Not that many members of Congress give out their cell phone number. So please understand that this doesn't happen. I know my former boss will never give out his cell phone number. So thank you for doing that.
You're, Congress, and I think I have 434 colleagues there. I'm about the only one who does this. I trust voters. Now, talking about this bill, both parties are actually for this bill. The trouble is that just congressional Republicans are not, because Trump's Federal Reserve Chairman, Jerome Powell, was for Congress going big, and we did. But also President Biden's Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen, is for this bill. So it has great bipartisan support across the country, just not in Washington. Now, the media focused on what's not in the bill, and I'm sorry that the $15 minimum wage is not in the bill. We couldn't squeeze that through the Senate. And I'm sorry that the unemployment benefit wasn't $400, but it's only $300. But that still doubles the normal Tennessee benefit, which is extraordinary to go into states like Tennessee and double what our state government would provide for us. And as I say, unfortunately, congressional Republicans were too stubborn to help us on this. Not a one of them voted for it. Next slide, please. Now, this is a pie chart. You've seen pie charts, but this pie chart is probably larger than anyone, because even the tiniest piece of pie in this chart is huge, like mega huge. Tennessee from this chart will get an estimated $30 billion. That's almost as big as the state budget, as we'll get into in a later slide. But let me go through the biggest pieces of this pie chart. The blue area there, it's $411 billion in stimulus checks. And that's the $1,400 payment that should come to your mailbox. It couldn't be direct deposited in your account. This is amazing. Every American, basically, unless you're ultra wealthy, gets this check. That's incredible. So take advantage of that and make sure you get your check. If there are any mishaps, call our office and we'll try to fix it for you. The next biggest slice, the orange slice, is something Republicans really hate, and that's aid to state and local governments. You know, the city of Nashville was really hurt, not only by the pandemic and by the recent floods, but also by the Christmas bombing, things like that. And this is aid to cities like Nashville so they can help solve our local problems. And Republicans generally are against that. I mentioned earlier, we increased the unemployment insurance benefit. We also did something extraordinary, and this is the yellow slice. That looks like a smaller slice on this chart, but as I say, every piece of this pie is mega huge. This yellow slice is supposed to reduce childhood poverty in Tennessee and around America by 50%. Cut childhood poverty in half. That's a whole variety of programs we'll get into the details of, but that's an extraordinary accomplishment. Finally, there's 177 billion in reopening schools. And this is not only K through 12, but also higher education, because we got to get our kids back to school safely. And this helps schools prepare to do that. There's a ton of money in here for more vaccines and for PPE and to keep everybody healthy and for federally qualified health centers like Matthew Walker. There's even money in there for agriculture, including African-American farmers. It's amazing what's in this bill. So let's go through parts of it. Next slide, please. So first, step back and understand how transformative this bill is. It's gigantic, it's colossal, it's amazing. So first of all, it should improve the health and health insurance for everybody. Second, it's supposed to help us survive the economy. And there's special help in this bill for Nashville type businesses, because with a tourist-driven economy here, we probably have more bars, restaurants, and music venues than almost any other city in the country per capita. That's why we are Music City. And we got $26 billion in this bill for restaurants and another $16 billion just for music venues. So that hopefully that'll keep a lot of good places afloat that were really suffering, because they were the first to close and probably the last to reopen in this pandemic. As I mentioned, there's huge help for children, school reopenings, child support, food benefits, all sorts of things. And the key thrust of this bill, unlike in the Trump administration, is equity for all, because this bill believes that a rising tide lifts all the boats. This is not for the top 1%. This is not for the rich folks. This is for everybody. Next slide. So to give you an idea, the whole Tennessee budget in a year is about $42 billion. And just the CARES Act that we passed last year gave Tennessee $34 billion. Now, a lot of that money's already been spent, but what we did this time is basically to give us another CARES Act. And this money we'll have until 2024 to spend this money. Next slide, please. So children and families, that's what's most important in life. This increases the maximum child benefit for each child under 6 years of age to $3,600 per year, and $3,000 for every child under 17. So for some families with a bunch of kids, that's a lot of money. There's also $12 billion in nutrition benefits, and this is through the food stamp program, what's now called SNAP, the WIC program, Women, Infant, and Children Feeding Program, and also PEBT, which is when you get your school lunch, even though you're not going to school. That's a major way to help our kids get healthy food. The Child Independent Care Credit's been increased to $8,000 for child-related expenses. So this is literally going to lift a lot of families with kids completely out of poverty. In Nashville, it's estimated there will be 12,500 fewer children living in poverty. 12,500 kids with a better chance at a better future. Now for individuals, it's also mentioned the $1,400 checks that you should be getting in your mailbox. It's as if there were a big mega lottery prize, and 351,000 families in our area just happened to buy a ticket for that mega lottery prize. This is amazing, because they'll be sharing, those 351,000 families will be sharing $908 million. Next slide. Part of the tricky part of this bill is, even though we couldn't get the minimum wage increased, we did pass the earned income tax credit. And that's what Democratic presidents back to Bill Clinton said was as good or better than increasing the minimum wage. And it's really important to know that these benefits are now advanceable and refundable, which is another way of saying the government writes you a check. You might not owe any taxes at all, but the government will be writing you a check, and that's an amazing thing. It also increases eligibility dramatically for the Earned Income Tax Credit, the EITC. So for those of you, and I know it's painful to think about taxes, especially this time of year, but this is a way that the tax man will help you, not take money from your pocket, but write you a check. So focus on that, the EITC. Unemployment. So many of our friends and family are still thrown out of work. And as I say, this doubles the maximum Tennessee unemployment benefit, which was a meager $275 a week. Can't live on that. And that's the top benefit. For so many Tennesseans, it's way lower than that. So this extra $300 a week really helps. And we also made the first $10,200 of that money tax exempt. People forget that when you get a check from the federal government, that's taxable, but it's not if, you know, in this case, up to $10,200. So some 65,000 Tennesseans are going to directly benefit from these provisions. Next slide, please. Now, this is something really near and dear to my heart because I've been fighting for years to get Tennessee to cover everyone with health insurance. And our stubborn friends in the state legislature have just refused to do that, even though Tennessee leads the nation in the number of hospital closures. Nothing is sadder than that when a community loses its hospital, usually its only hospital, just because the legislature is too short-sighted. So if you look at this map, it shows the orange states are the ones that are too stubborn to help the people with health insurance. Now, the blue states have all passed it. Even so, a lot of these blue states are Republican states. Mike Pence's Indiana expanded Medicaid coverage. The Republican state of Idaho and Nebraska have voted to expand it. And just recently, Missouri and Oklahoma, our neighbors and near neighbors, have expanded Medicaid. But our state legislature is about to make a big mistake if they don't expand. Let me show you that mistake. Tennessee right now in this bill is being offered $1.2 billion, billion with a B, if they just expand Medicaid. And that's on top of all the other money the federal government is trying to give Tennessee if they will just help our poor and low-income people who need health insurance, especially during a pandemic. So I'm scared to death Tennessee is going to turn down this carrot. It's the richest carrot, most golden carrot in the world. Imagine being offered $1.2 billion just to do the right thing. So we need to be working with our state legislature and praying for them. Now, the Davidson County delegation is fine on this. It's the folks from other parts of the state that we need to worry about. But it's a huge windfall for Tennessee if we're just smart enough to take advantage of it. Next slide, please. Can you mention the small business loans that are involved in here? We have a great SBA state director here in Tennessee. But the PPP loan program and the EIDL program are both expanded and continued so that any small businesses who need help either from a commercial bank with loans that are backed up by the federal government, or you get them directly from SBA through the EIDL program, the money's there for you. So make sure you take advantage of it. Next slide, please. Nashville as a city will get a check from the federal government for $267 million. That's a lot of money. It's not all in one piece, it's in two pieces. First check will come May 10th. Next check will come next March. But this is for any expense the city has incurred before December 31, 2024. So this is a real pot of money that can benefit a lot of folks. And it'll essentially be up to our Metro Council to divvy up that money to decide who gets it. But this is a real opportunity for the people of Davidson County to get a fair distribution of this money. Next slide, please. Education really hugely benefits. And few things are more important than education. And you know that Nashville's called the Athens of the South. And one of the great reasons for that are 4 HBCUs here in Nashville: American Baptist, TSU, Meharry, and Fisk. We are rich with HBCUs, and they should benefit tremendously from this. The higher education piece of this is $703 million just for the colleges and universities in Tennessee. This money will be divvied up by the state legislature. So we need to make sure that Nashville and Nashville's higher education gets its fair share. K through 12 schools will get $200.
This included fulfillment centers, sort centers.
Dollars. The K through Head Start program will benefit tremendously. So it's really education from high to low. Next slide, please. Housing assistance. Sorry, the type on this slide is so small, but so many things are covered by this. Help with the rent, help with your mortgage, help with your electric bill, help with your water bill. It's extraordinary. Now, to get this money, sometimes you'll have to go to NES, the Nashville Electric Service, talk to Costa Jenkins over there. Sometimes it'll be the water department, that's Scott Potter. Sometimes it'll be your landlord. and let them know that you're entitled to help from this program, because nobody should be thrown out on the street. And we've tried to do our best to stop all evictions, because right now, especially as we're recovering from COVID, nobody should be thrown out on the street. That is wrong. It's also stupid for most landlords, because they end up losing money when they do things like that. So it's an incredible package of benefits here for housing assistance. Next slide, please. Transit. This is one of the main ways that they got around state legislatures, because the state legislature generally isn't that friendly to Nashville. But here they won't have much choice because of the $113 million that Tennessee got. Metro's already been allocated $48 million. So we nearly got half of it. That's pretty strong. Enhanced mobility for seniors and others with disabilities. This is amazing. We've already gotten at least 15% of that money. We need to make sure that we take advantage of that. Next slide. There's so many other things in the bill. As I say, even the tiniest slices of this pie are amazing. So it's a real opportunity. As I say, it's kind of like an Easter egg hunt. We all need to be going out and finding these golden eggs. But all sorts of things to help with public health, to help with disaster relief, to help with emergency food and shelter, to help with firefighters, airports, even the arts are covered by this bill. So it's amazing, and it's designed to be a really strong stimulus. But as I say, one of the things I'm proudest about is that Nashville, with our tourist-based economy, got an extra portion of help in this bill, because I don't know any city that has more bars and restaurants than Nashville does, and it's part of our appeal to folks nationwide and worldwide. We got to bring those businesses back strong. So restaurants got 28, nearly $29 billion. That's extraordinary. Tennessee restaurants should be getting 572 million of that. That's a lot of money. And the music venues, sometimes this is called shuttered venue operator grants. Government acronyms are terrible, as Kenya knows. We should be getting at least 325 million out of that program. So there's never been a windfall like this. There's never been an opportunity. Now, we're recovering. This isn't a gravy. A lot of folks are just repairing damage done by the virus and by the bad economy. But this is a terrific opportunity for Nashvillians and people in the 5th Congressional District and in Tennessee to do a little bit better. So I'm proud it's coming home, and hopefully everybody will benefit. Be happy to take any questions.
So, Congressman, that was like an excellent breakdown of this bill. I don't think that the newspapers have done it due diligence, particularly as it pertains to us here in Nashville. And so people have asked questions, so I'm going to turn to them, and I'm also going to offer in the questions I have. But I do have a question from the chat that asks in regards to small businesses. I think Mr. Wolford asked, how will local restaurants in Black neighborhoods access the restaurant recovery funds?
Every one of these programs has an application process, and we can get you the details on that. We've had trouble with SBA opening their portal so that you could apply directly for the shuttered venues, and that's more on the music venue and bar side. The restaurant side is an even larger amount of money, but it's great because unlike competing in the pool with all businesses, where we saw so many of our largest businesses kind of hog the money, you may have read in the paper, this is 6 months or so ago, HCA, a very large local corporation, got $6 billion in PPP loans. And guess what? They were honest enough to admit they didn't need the money, so they returned it. Like, that's pretty rare for people to give back $6 billion, but
Wow.
and I think that's, to their credit, because they made a mistake initially. They tried to hog some of the money, but they admitted their mistake and gave it back. But see, this restaurant money, you don't have to compete against anybody else except other restaurants. So it's not a question of competing against hospitals or computer companies or car companies. So it's a real leg up for the restaurant business. And it's exactly what the restaurant advocates really wanted. Rarely in my time in Congress have people gotten exactly what they wanted. But President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris made sure this happened, and Congress went along. And thank goodness we did, because the margin was very tight. As I say, we had to get this through without any Republican votes, and we have zero margin in the Senate. We'll have a 3-person margin in the House. So the next bill that we talk about, the infrastructure bill, that's going to be a close call. And President Biden and we all are going to have to work hard together as a team to get big bills like that passed.
And so another question from the chat is that this is from Ms. Moore. What part of this package will help generational families such as North Nashville maintain and upgrade their property with the gentrification push?
Mm-hmm. Well, most property issues, that's going to be a local issue because it's a local property tax and it's local zoning. So your voices in the Metro Council will be key in determining how that is decided. But in the meantime, the $1,400 check that you should be getting every month, and that's on top of the $600 check that we sent out starting last December, that should really help tide people over during some tough times. But we want to make sure that first, in medicine and in policy, it should be first to do no harm. Don't make the patient any worse off, and then do all you can to keep the patient healthy. And that's what this bill tries to do. First, repair the damage, and then, as President Biden says, build back better. And that's what we need to do.
So Congressman, talk about this. We're just under, I think in like 2 weeks, we'll be hitting 100 days. And so talk about some of the things that happen behind the scenes, because like you said, this is the largest infusion of dollars that America has seen. So some of the conversations that you had with your colleagues, because as you stated, and as we know, the country wanted this, Democrat, purple, blue, whatever color you are and whatever party you are. But we could not get a single Republican to vote for this bill. So the impact, particularly in our state, in this area, how they kind of hurt us, but also to, tell us like what kind of conversation was going on as you were moving through this bill.
Well, Kenya, I'm delighted to give you some of the inside skinny on this. Back when Phil Bredesen was governor of Tennessee, we were so proud because we got Race to the Top money. And that was like $500 million. And that was huge because we beat out many other states to get that money, and a free $500 million. That doesn't happen every day. Well, guess what? In this bill alone, Tennessee is getting 8 times more than that. 8 times more than the Race to the Top money. So that's just extraordinary. I haven't talked to former Governor Bredesen about it, but this is amazing. Now, Congress was able to do this because of the nationwide and worldwide pandemic, a real emergency if there's ever been one, because this stuff we hope only happens every 100 years. That was the last time we had a pandemic like this. And it also did a lot to crush our economy, because when you have this business slowdown and mask wearing and everything like that, that really, everybody knows the pain we've been going through this last year. So it was kind of incredible that a slow body like Congress was able to respond first with the CARES Act, and then with the December Act that was smaller, and then now this huge one in the first 100 days of the Biden presidency. Because this really could be the bridge to recovery, the bridge to better futures for everybody in Tennessee. It's extraordinary. Now, these are debts we're accumulating. We had to borrow most of this money. We'll have to pay it back. But this is basically a World War II size effort, only we're not fighting foreigners. We're not fighting the Germans or the Japanese. But we're spending about that much money to help Americans. We're not killing anybody. We're trying to help everybody. And I think it's real policy progress when you can mobilize the economy, the entire economy, to help people and not have to use war as an excuse.
Right. I have actually, Ms. Robinson asked a question regarding the help for landlords, and I'm just going to refer you to Metro Action, Ms. Robinson, because Metro Action has a huge HOPE program, but you want to contact Metro Action because I know that the congressman is going to tell you that that's on a local level. So please contact Metro Action if you're here in Davidson County. Another question, actually, it comes from our president and CEO, but he asked, what can we do to help get these bills passed to benefit more communities? While we're still on the on the rescue plan. I think he's more so speaking as we move through for the American jobs and this infrastructure bill that's coming up.
Yeah. The next bill could be as large as like $3 trillion, which is extraordinary. Now, a lot of that would be not money to be spent, but money to be invested in roads and bridges and long overdue things. But it's not just in the physical infrastructure, but also the human infrastructure. Trying to make, for example, broadband fair, because we couldn't have remote learning if kids couldn't get good access to the internet. And that's an urban issue. It's also a huge rural issue. So the large $3 trillion infrastructure bill will need Republican votes to pass. Now, traditionally, infrastructure has been bipartisan because everybody wants better roads and bridges and transportation and internet. But Republicans have been so taken in by Donald Trump, and they're still, breathing his fire. It's just, it's difficult to recover from that. So Democrats have to be completely unified, and then we have to peel off a couple of Republican votes because, as Kenya knows, in the Senate, you usually need 60 votes to get something done. We were able to scrape by this last time with 51 votes, and maybe we can do that again, but it's nip and tuck. So we've got to really make sure we're all together and unified, because between this rescue plan bill and the new bill, the Infrastructure Act, that could really give us a new economy and a better opportunity for everybody.
Also, too, I want to let people know that Congressman Cooper, colleague passed this morning, which is Congressman Alcee Hastings. And so now the majority has dwindled. I think you have 3 to 4 seats that you can only chip off as you go into this next battle for when you return. So I know that that's kind of difficult. Hopefully we'll be able to add some more seats to that. Congressman Ed, the fight, we know we did not get the $15 minimum wage increase. I know that over on the Senate side that Bernie Sanders and others are still going to try to work to find some kind of ways to get that going on. But on the House side, talk about, you added tax credit, like you said, families, if you have 2, 4, and 5 kids, they came out with a big payday. And so, and we know that that's just a small portion of things. We also know that they get is it $600 or is it $300 after a certain time that will expand to September. But talk about what that impact does here directly here in Nashville, Davidson County, because without that could be, people losing out on housing, that's food. What's the impact that that's going to directly impact here in Nashville?
Well, thank you, Kenya. Those are all excellent questions. First of all, my colleague, Alcee Hastings, he was a good friend of mine. We will really miss Alcee. He really is a good soul, and I'm mourning his passing. The margin now in the House of Representatives is probably down to 2 votes. I haven't checked exactly, but it's very, very close. So we have to have people who are not sick with COVID, and we have to have people show up for work, and we have to have them all singing from the same page to get this stuff done. There's so much we need to figure out to help people, and there are ways to do it by working together. Nashvillians, though, have to think of a local issue, because there might not be a Nashville congressional district next year. The legislature could easily pie slice Nashville and turn it over to my Republican colleagues who live like in South Pittsburgh or Franklin or Clarksville or Cookeville. And it would be terrible to take the state capital and chop it up into little pieces, but they're thinking of doing exactly that, because in terms of rebalancing Congress, that's all they'd have to do is to get another seat, and basically to treat me like, the death treated Alcee Hastings. So it's really a threat that you cannot take the Nashville congressional district for granted. We are completely at the mercy of the state legislature, and most of them are not very fond of Nashville. So we've really got to be careful here. They could even get rid of the Memphis district if they worked hard to do that, but Nashville is easy to get rid of. So there's a lot we need to talk about a lot to figure out. And that's why I gave out my cell phone number at the start of the call so that everybody could get access to me who wants to ask questions. And as a reminder, it's 615-714-1719. So I would love it if Urban League people had, the best way of getting hold of me. So there's so much in your question. I was trying to unpack some of it, Kenya, but the bill has amazing opportunities. So Kara Ince on my staff, she basically spends full time just studying these things and figuring out where the money's going. The Nashville State Legislature has a whole committee just to divvy up the money. And as I've said, the Metro Council will be divvying up the money here for Nashville. So, and then select institutions like our hospitals, like Nashville General, our colleges and universities like Fisk, Meharry, American Baptist, and TSU get direct money. The airport gets direct money. There are amazing opportunities here. So we've got to be seeking them out.
I know today that you will be on a call, much like this one, a Zoom call with Secretary Yellen. She's going to be talking to House Democrats, and I know she's going to be talking about the American Rescue Plan. But what else do you expect for her to bring to the table to talk to you about that you want to share with voters?
Well, hopefully she'll give us more good news about the economy. You probably saw the employment numbers. They were very good last week. I think almost 1 million Americans got jobs last week, and that's really important. That's really a boost. We need to keep the economy headed in that direction because everybody benefits when there's plenty of work for everybody to do. We need to work on getting the wages up. And that's why I mentioned earlier in the presentation that even though we failed to get the minimum wage up because of the Senate, the earned income tax credit is still in there. So remember those letters, EITC. And this is a way to get basically the same benefit as if you got the $15 minimum wage. And presidents like Bill Clinton have actually preferred it over increasing the minimum wage. So don't forget that EITC benefit. When I hold press conferences about that, everybody who's listening is able to benefit from it. The journalists, the cameraman, everybody, because it applies. And it used to be super child dependent. Now you can be single without any kids and still benefit. So we've made it as close an equivalent as we could to raising the minimum wage. So don't tell the Republicans, I'm not sure they're clued into this yet, but it's a backdoor way of achieving the same thing.
So now as we, there's a lot of questions. Let's see, I had another question that asks because you brought up redistricting, and we know that I think there's later this month, you all are supposed to receive the full outcomes from the census. And so a couple questions was, do you have any talking points that we can use to advocate to protect Nashville's congressional representation? And then the other question is, how do we prevent Nashville from being divided up into smaller districts? And I think that they're probably those are the same questions, kind of.
The timetable has changed a little bit. The numbers were supposed to come out now, and that's the traditional time period, but they've delayed it for 6 months because, President Trump screwed up a lot of things, including the census. So they need more time to make sure it's an accurate count. So we'll probably get the numbers in October. Then there'll be a special session of the legislature, and they'll probably vote late at night when everybody's in the dark, and then announce the result in the morning, and then there'll be nothing we can do about it. So we're almost completely at the mercy of the legislature when it comes to persuading them to do the right thing. We need to do everything we can because the Supreme Court had a ruling last year that basically said there's no legal recourse to stop the whims of the state legislature. One hope is that we could complain if they break up African-American voting blocks. That is certainly true in Memphis. It should also be true here in Nashville, but that is not as likely, and that could take years. So we need to make sure that the the legislature has some restraint. In past years, they generally showed restraint. When Nashville had the speaker, Beth Harwell, in the state legislature, I think she would have been embarrassed if they chopped up Nashville, but she's no longer a speaker. Now the speaker is a guy from Crossville, Tennessee. So it's really going to be the heaviest political fight that we have in the next 6 months to make sure the legislature does the right thing. And we have very few weapons in this fight.
I will tell you, if you are interested, one, you need to make sure you know who your state rep is and your state senator, because as the congressman has stated, that this will fall upon his or her needs, and as well as to pay attention. We know that they're going to go behind closed doors. The Urban League has made this a issue priority number one. We do care about what's going to happen to Nashville, Davidson County, and all of Middle Tennessee, because we do represent 9 counties within this community. But as the National Urban League as a whole is paying attention. So don't let people say, oh, we need to be worried about having these little groups that can help come up with these panels. Nashville and Tennessee are far beyond that. So don't let that become a part of your conversation. We do need to pay attention. And so I would say is to start the conversation, asking the questions, because they will go behind closed doors, and they will, they probably have already started. Let me just say that and put my political hat right back on. And they're using the last census. So when we ask you to vote and when we ask you to complete the census, these are the reasons why. Because as my grandmother would say, is that if you don't want someone to know what you're doing, you're gonna go do it in the dark. And that's exactly what they're about to, that's what they're doing. And so, but if you don't start calling them out and asking questions about it, they're gonna continue doing it. And I think Congressman Cooper, that Speaker Sexton is he not from Cookeville? I think he's from Cookeville. He's one of the thieves.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the kind of things that are happening, and they're going to be even more agitated to do so because of the things that are happening in Congress. I think you talked about that Tennessee stands to gain $1.2 billion if they would accept the expansion. Now, we know that earlier towards the end of last year, the beginning of this year, that the Tennessee State Legislature voted to approve the block grant. And they knew that once this election was over with and we we're going to have a new administration, that the Biden administration was going to make some changes to and probably not accept the block grant. And so I believe that there are some conversations that are happening with the Tennessee legislator. Do you know anything about what's happening to expand Medicare on the heels of knowing that they're probably going to lose the support of the Biden administration for block grants? Can you talk about that?
Kenya, you're great. Your knowledge of the issues is amazing. One of the last acts of the Trump administration, just about a week before he left office, finally, they approved the Tennessee application for a block grant. Now, they'd had this sitting on their desk for a year and a half. Makes you think that, why did they do it at the last minute? It was really just to mess with the Biden administration and to mess with Tennessee Democrats. So they approved it at the last minute. And the Biden administration is looking at undoing that. But they tried to handcuff Tennessee by making it a 10-year agreement and sign all sorts of pieces of paper. But one mistake they made is they didn't approve all of it. They left out a part called the graduate medical education piece, the GME piece. And that is set to expire this summer. And that would cripple our medical colleges in Tennessee, including Meharry, including Vanderbilt, unless we can get the GME waiver approved. So that gives the federal government extra negotiating power with the state to say, hey, if you want your doctor slots, you better reconsider this block grant thing. So there'll probably be heavy duty negotiations. They should start soon because June isn't that far away. And we've got to keep the doctor pipeline coming. We've got to keep Meharry and Vanderbilt and other medical schools in Tennessee strong. And as I say, because of that mistake and last minute paperwork by the Trump administration, we have an opportunity to revise this whole agreement.
That's pretty deep. I had no idea that that's what it was. But I am a strong proponent and advocate for Meharry. So I do believe that you've given us some extra notes to always send cover for Meharry, but for any doctor, because that also would mean that my dad would be without teaching. Because my friend Jessica Dolphin is on and she's asking for you to unpack some things on transportation. We know that our roads here are pretty raggedy. We know that our bridges, they need some love, but talk about what is in the American Rescue Plan that is impactful for transportation.
Well, you think of roads as local because you can't move a road. It's paved right there on your street and it's stuck to the dirt. If you talk to the Commissioner of Transportation in Tennessee, a guy named Clay Bright, I was just on the phone with him last week. It seems like the whole world has been Zoom calls recently. You know, way over half their budget comes free from the federal government, free from Uncle Sam, free from taxpayers like you, basically. So it's kind of an amazing thing. And this money is only going up. It is amazing how much they're getting. Now, they were too proud to ask for it, but they're not too proud to spend it. And we need to make sure they have equitable distribution of the funds so they don't just pave all the roads in Williamson County, but pave the roads in Davidson County too. But there's more money than they've ever had before. You know, Governor Haslam a few years ago was able to get a small increase in the fuel tax passed, but only if he lowered other taxes even more. So it was a net loss to the state government. The Biden administration has taken a bolder approach. And during this emergency, they're taking advantage of the emergency and they're going ahead and handing out the money. And it's going to help a lot of folks. So part of it is in the act we've just passed, the rescue plan, but part of it is going to be in this new infrastructure bill. We need to make sure that both packages are passed because it's a whole new emphasis on equity. Because as people know, right now we have the most unequal society we've had in America since the 1920s, a century ago. So we've got to fix things, and this is our opportunity to do
it. So with that, I mean, you know, transportation in Tennessee is not what, you know, when I worked on the Hill, the best place that had the best roads from Mississippi because of everything that was taking place. And I mean, when you go to Williamson County, their roads are raggedy too. So let me just state that for a mere fact, because I know that more dollars are going to move around in this next bill. Talk about what that infrastructure can do for us if, as we shift from the this current bill over to what you all are about to start getting into.
Well, the Biden-Harris vision is not just physical infrastructure, not just roads, bridges, internet. It's also families. Because if you don't have strong families, if you don't have healthy kids, if you don't have real opportunities, then you don't have people who are going to be able to take advantage of the roads and bridges and the internet. So it's really a comprehensive vision, and we've never seen anything like this before. We don't know what will be in the final package, but what they've proposed already is just, it's amazing. And as I say, this isn't so much a stimulus package, it's more of an investment package. This is something that will benefit us years from now and will benefit future generations. Because as you point out, so many of our roads that we used to be proud of are a lot of weak spots now. And the traffic congestion in places like Nashville can be overwhelming. And, you know, we haven't had the attention we've needed for mass transit opportunities for everybody to get around the city. So it's partly in the Rescue Act that we've already passed and partly in this new bill, the biggest help we've ever seen for these roads and bridges. And I think we're going to see a lot of other things expand too. As I mentioned, the rescue plan already has mass transit money in there. We're going to see help for broadband. We're going to see help for families. It's really an extraordinary investment in the future of America. And President Biden explains it this way. He said, look, we didn't used to have to worry about China. They're the largest country on earth in terms of people. And for the last half century, their economy has been booming. And they're catching up with us. We got to make a decision now. Are we going to be better and stronger than China? Or are we going to just gradually decline? And he doesn't want any decline on our part. He wants us to be better and stronger. And that's why he's proposing bold legislation like this to get the job done.
As you talk about broadband, because we know that since spending a year in doing Zoom calls, kids on virtual, talk about broadband, because I still don't think that our governor and our state legislator are really pushing it. I will say that I will give her some credit. Senator Blackburn did push for more funding, but she did turn around and vote against the bill. So talk about unpack what that looks like and how we can also be advocates to help expand that.
I hope and pray, and I work hard every day to try to get our senators to do the right thing. But so far, they've not shown much interest in that. Broadband is one of many issues, but basically, you can't get by in modern life without good access to the internet. You know, it used to be, I can remember the days we had dial-up, and that was slow and awkward, but nobody had broadband. Today, if you don't have broadband, you're out of business, and you probably can't go to school, and you're not even going to know what the news is. So, part of it is America's got a problem in general, wherever you are, because we're paying more for broadband and getting less service than people of other advanced countries. There's some fundamental reasons for that we need to clear up. But we also need to make sure that everybody gets some sort of broadband, and that hasn't happened. I like to cite the example when Franklin Roosevelt knew that rural Americans needed electricity. He didn't wait for the private companies to do it. He started this thing called electric cooperatives. And they spread in about 10 years, wires all over America. And we've already spent 20 years plus trying to get broadband to everybody. So there are too many people in the way trying to hamper progress and trying to have a big payday. You know, the Google Fibers and the fancy folks who come in offering broadband, where do they build it? In the richest parts of town.
Right.
We need a universal service obligation. And that's the way to make sure everybody's served, so that, you know, I've had to find myself in Zoom calls. Oftentimes I'll go to McDonald's parking lot because that's the only place I get reliable Wi-Fi. You know, we shouldn't have a patchwork system. Everybody should be able to get it because it should be part of the American dream.
To talk about, I mean, you know, great to know that our congressman has to go to McDonald's parking lot to get Wi-Fi. Can you let's talk about the money for homeless, for housing. We have a new secretary. She, you know, last week, week before last, they unrolled the new report, and they were able to tell us to shed light that homelessness was starting to become a major factor prior to COVID. And as we drive around our communities, we are seeing more tents around the community, more people panhandling, standing out about. And so, you know, a lot of that has to do with a lot of issues, but let's talk about, because, you know, Nashville is building a lot of rooftops, but I haven't seen us make any impact or bring in any workforce housing, anything like that. So you want to talk about what's packed into this bill for housing?
There are huge equity issues with housing. And it's not just in Nashville. Williamson County, which is, I think, now the 9th richest county in America, have effectively excluded most low-income people. They don't even want apartments there but, you know, somebody's still got to work in their restaurants and places, you know. Nashville has similar problems because we haven't succeeded in bringing prosperity to everybody. We're proud of our tall buildings, but we also need to be wary of folks who don't have a decent place to live at all. There are many reasons for this. Back when TVA was first started, they didn't believe in home insulation. And Nashville has more uninsulated all electric homes than any other city in the world because TVA promised us electricity that was too cheap to meter, and they were not able to fulfill that promise. Right now, there are issues with zoning and school choice and property taxes, and most of those are local issues, but this bill tries to, first of all, keep people in their homes, no evictions, no turmoil like that. Ideally, weatherize the home so that it can be more cost efficient. Ideally, have a better school system in each zip code in Davidson County in the country, and basically make it fairer. Now, with public housing, which is an aspect of housing, we need to acknowledge, and this is something a lot of folks didn't pay attention to, but a few years ago, the federal government transferred to Nashville about $2 billion worth of public housing so that Nashvillians can make the decision about how those housing projects are renovated and improved. And that's kind of an extraordinary thing, a $2 billion gift, so that Nashvillians can decide how to do that. And again, the Metro Council, and more importantly, the Metro Housing Development Agency, MDHA, is really the group that's, and you've seen in Casey Homes and a bunch of different places, kind of amazing transformations take place. But we need to make sure that there are diverse income requirements so that you don't just build these places for rich folks, so that at least 30% plus are maintained for folks with regular incomes. The Metro Council took it on itself years ago to even have an artist apartment. It's on Rolling Mill Hill, where if you're a struggling artist, you get a special deal on a place, because Nashville needs to always be a city that attracts talent, and you have to have a place for them to live. And I thought that was a pretty cool idea. But the homelessness is still a problem. You know, several of them died in the most recent flood because they're forced to live in some of the least desirable parts of our community, and they're outdoors and unprotected. So we've got a lot of work to do in this regard, but food, shelter, and clothing are some of the most essential things in life. And we got to make sure that all three are available here so that we all have a chance at the American dream.
As our time kind of comes to the end, and you know, I could talk to you all day because I know what's going on. We also see some changes, you know, not just that we have a vice president that looks like me, but she's also Asian American, a woman. I believe that this cabinet is probably one of the most diverse that I've seen, but also too, the conversation of some of the things that is being talked about. Talk about what is the conversation and the impact making some changes on race equity. We know that your colleagues, Congresswoman Presley, have the fight, as well Senator Warner, wanted to fight to make sure that we started getting some race equity on COVID and how important that is. So talk about race equity, because there's a lot of conversation. It hits on workforce, it hits in education, it hits in transportation. So talk about that, because I think that that is starting to become, I don't really want to say a buzzword, but it's the conversation, the issue is more prevalent today than it was even under the Obama administration.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's a super exciting time to be alive, because, you know, we all remember the great days of the civil rights era of the 60s, but this is a new period of renewal and revitalization, and it may even be greater than that period. Now, we wouldn't be here today without their successful work in the 60s, but it's amazing how many people are finally acknowledging what's been true forever: systemic racism. You know, you call it racial equity. There is systemic racism out there. And sometimes it's hidden and sometimes it's not so hidden. But you don't need to tell any minority, you know, how prevalent it is. And it's everywhere. So solving that problem is a challenge of this generation. And I think we can solve it. We must solve it. It's so long overdue, because we've had the original sin of, you know, slavery in America for 400 years. And it's taken way too long to erase that stain. So we've got to pull together to acknowledge this. I encourage people to read books. Ibram Kendi has an amazing book that helps people understand it's not good enough to be a compromiser. You've got to be an anti-racist. And he faults even some of our great civil rights leaders for not being anti-racist enough. There's a wonderful book on American history I encourage everybody to read. It's called These Truths. Mm-hmm. It's by a woman named Jill Lepore, Lepore. And she's amazing. She writes so well. And it teaches everybody so much about our history that we should have known, but we didn't quite know it. And see, once you know it, you're empowered. It's an amazing book. It's kind of a thick book because it's on all of American history, but it's called These Truths. And I hand it out to folks because I just think it's so important to read that. So that and Ibram Kendi's book is amazing. But there's so many good books now. People need to be steeped in the literature because no matter how close attention you've been paying, you're going to learn something new and something important that will help guide us to a better future. I think it was Dr. King who said the arc of history is long, but it bends toward justice. We need to make it bend a little faster. In fact, way faster. And with knowledge like this, we can all be empowered to make that happen.
I believe you just made President Harris's day. He is often and always encouraging us to read books. So I hope that you all got the 2 books that Congressman Cooper just shared. Also, this is also the first.
I got one of them. Kenny, I want to have a preach conference.
I will like to say that this is probably the first time that I've also been able to talk to you and actually see you since 1/6. We shared 9/11, but talk about that. I know your staff, you're in the Longworth building, and I'm a former Longworth a resident as well, but you're to the left of the Capitol, but you could see everything that was happening. And I know that people probably did not really get a chance to kind of hear some of your take about 1/6. So can you tell us what you were doing and where you were on this day?
Well, you're right, Kenyon. You know the layout there. You were on the 7th floor. I'm on the 5th floor. It started off as what we thought was a small demonstration, and there are demonstrations on the Hill all the time. But it got out of hand in a hurry, and more people came, and they started using violence that we've never seen before, at least not in my lifetime. And then pretty soon they broke through the police barricades, and pretty soon the police were on the run, and pretty soon you couldn't find a policeman much of anywhere because they were way outnumbered and way outgunned, and they were fighting literally for their lives. So the worst damage was in the Capitol, but once the barricades fell and the doors were busted open, they literally could have gone anywhere. And so we barricaded ourselves in our office, and it was pretty scary because you'd hear heavy footsteps coming down the hallway, and you didn't know if they were coming for you because they were there threatening to hang the vice president, Mike Pence. And he was one of them, a fellow Republican. They don't have any love for Democrats. And you've seen the pictures. You saw the folks who had guns to protect the floor of the House. And one poor lady was shot because she was trying to break through the glass. Now, the Senate floor was completely overrun, and they could have literally massacred the entire US Senate. They were rifling through their desks. They got hold of Speaker Pelosi's desk, and I know that her staff was terrified because she's one of their #1 targets because she stands for change and opportunity, and a lot of those folks find that objectionable. But it was really a dark, sad day in American history because there should always be, a safe Capitol, a friendly Capitol, an open Capitol for all Americans to enjoy. And it's the only time in my lifetime that's happened. It probably was the worst incursion since the British burned the Capitol in 1814. And that's over 200 years ago. So it's so shameful that this was put on us by some of our own people, including some Tennesseans, like the zip tie guy was right, right here in Nashville. And so many people that were fed false information. And that's not me as a Democrat saying that. Mitch McConnell himself said that from the floor of the Senate, said they were fed a diet of lies by President Trump. And that's what motivated them to do this crazy stuff. But it really hurt us in the eyes of the world. It really destroyed a lot of confidence. And it's really a harmful thing that will take a long, long time to recover from.
Also, you also have some new committees, and you want to talk about that because I know that you chair a subcommittee, but you also were added to a very prominent committee, and I think that share with us about your committees.
Well, Kenya, I'm so glad you know so much about Washington, but committees are the way Congress functions. And Speaker Pelosi has complete power pretty much over who's on what committee. And, you know, I've accepted some of her assignments. Some of them weren't my first choice, but she needed good people to do it. So I'm happy to do it. But she recently gave me about the highest honor that she can give anybody.
Yeah.
210 of my colleagues wanted the seats on the Intelligence Committee, and she only had 2 seats to offer. So I got one of the 2 seats on the Intelligence Committee, even though I had competition from about, as I say, 210 of my colleagues. So that's pretty amazing. The Intelligence Committee guards our nation's secrets, and these are some of our most important secrets. It's not just the secrets of the CIA, but believe it or not, there are 17 other intelligence agencies. Now, some people know about NSA that does wiretapping there, but there are a bunch of others. And some of them, even the existence of these agencies was classified forever. So it's a great honor to do that. And right now I'm probably serving on more committees than anybody in Congress, because Speaker Pelosi had earlier put me on the Budget Committee, where you saw me before. I've been on the Budget Committee several times, and I'm pretty good at it. So she keeps wanting me to be on it. And one day I'll rotate off, but she said, Jim, you need to stay on the Budget Committee too for the time being. But I'm also on the Armed Services Committee, which is the whole Pentagon. And I have one of the most sacred and hard jobs in all of Congress, because I'm basically the one in charge of nuclear weapons and satellites and missiles and all that stuff. And it's super complicated and super, super classified. And then I'm on the Oversight Committee too, which does the investigations in Congress. And you may have seen me tangle with the Postmaster General, Louis DeJoy, and others, Michael Cohen, the president's former lawyer. We've had lots of, and the Sackler family, I call them the most evil family in America, because they polluted America with drugs and made billions of dollars doing it. So it's pretty busy up there, but I'm appreciative of the confidence that the Speaker has placed in me.
Congressman, thank you so much. Everyone, now you know some of the things that the Congressman has gotten himself into beyond the budget. To be on oversight is a lot of work. As he stated, he has gotten into a few entanglements, made national news, particularly most recently, his question and concerns of the Postmaster General. Next time you'll have to tell us how y'all are going to remove him as Postmaster General. I think people want to get their mail more in a day or two. But thank you so much for your time. I will ask you to reserve some time for me in August as your next recess comes up. But thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, thank you for joining us. If you are not a member of the Urban League, I empower you and encourage you to go to umlt.org and hit the join the movement button. Also, we encourage you to donate. If you have questions for us, want to know more about events such as this, please do so. More things are coming about. But also know that we do have a congressman that shares his phone number. So if you have questions, text him, because he might be in committee, but he does respond. Also, reach out to his staff. I know that there was a question asked regarding the FEMA dollars and the insurance. So please call the congressman's office so that they can help you. If you have any federal issues, call the congressman's office. As a former staff member, a lot of people tend to forget to reach out to their member of Congress's office. And so we want you to understand they're here to help you, to answer questions for you, and so forth. So I want to pass it off to our President and CEO, Clifton Harris, as he will bid us adieu. And then also look in the chat, because Cheryl Mays has dropped the congressman's phone number there, but Clifton, it's in your hands.
Thank you, Kenya. And Congressman, thank you for such informative information. You are always, a Hank Aaron. Every time you step up to the plate, you hit a home run. So thank you for being with us. I'm really looking forward, to our continued work together. And to our listening audience, thank you for listening in. And if you are not an Urban League member, we encourage you to become an Urban League member. We want to keep our focus on what's going on at the national level, state level, and the local level. And without your support, it wouldn't be possible for us to do so. So thank you for joining us. And everyone have a great and blessed day in Kenya. My grandmother used to say, what you do in the dark will come to light.
Thank you, everyone. Be safe. Have a good afternoon.